Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar here with a whole bunch of great people we'll introduce in a second. But this is learning to code in your spare time. It's debugging the pain, frustration, and challenge of becoming a developer without quitting your day job, which I think is something that a whole lot of you can definitely relate to. This is a tricky challenge. It's something that most developers, I'd say probably every developer who actually got started eventually and ended up as a developer working full time, started somehow learning in their spare time, whether it was as a student, whether it was as a kid, or for most of us these days, while working another job, nights and weekends, or doing the best that you can to squeeze it in on the side. So our goal for today is definitely to help you do whatever you can to get over some of those hurdles along the way. So as far as conventional wisdom goes, it's really easy to find a lot of resources out there that talk about what you're supposed to learn, right? We all know the web right now. If you've gone out there and you've even started Googling around how do I learn how to code, or if you're miles deep, you know that there's an absolute fire hose of information out there. And there's tons of people who are perfectly happy to tell you, here's what you're supposed to learn. You should learn A, you should learn B, you should learn C, and they're happy to throw a bunch of resources at you. The problem is that no one ever really pays much attention to how you're supposed to learn. And you could have the perfect path, but if you're failing along the way to actually execute that path, you're not really going to connect it to an outcome. And so the goal today is to focus less on the what you're supposed to learn, because there's plenty of places you can do that, more on the how you're supposed to learn, or at least the best practices around how you can learn when you're trying to balance learning with all sorts of other things in your life. So, and the other thing is that when you're on your own and when you're doing it part-time, it really matters even more than it would if you were full-time. So I mean, everything that we talk about today is gonna be hopefully relevant to everybody who's learning, regardless of what actual how it actually fits into your life. If you're someone who's on the 100 hours a week, can't do anything but code and Red Bull spectrum, or if you're on the other side of the spectrum, where you're really trying to fight for every hour that you can to fight this in, spending time on the subways, working at the park while your kids are playing, whatever it is, right? The less time that you have, the more the how actually does matter, because every minute does matter, and we'll talk about a lot of those things along the way that you may or may not be doing in the most efficient fashion. So, and as a developer, of course, you want to do everything in the most efficient fashion. So basically the goal of today is to talk about the how. So first, I just want to talk about what does success actually feel like, right? Just to get everyone on the same page, let's talk about what does it feel like when you're doing the right thing. And I think some of the clearest things about that are, it feels like you're in line, you've got a goal, you're in the zone, you have a clear path in front of you. You feel like when you have questions, you have the access to the support that you need, you're comfortable, and basically, and you have a schedule that allows you to fit that learning into your life, and that allows it to, allows you to feel successful every time you sit down. At the end of every week, you can look back and say, I did something, I learned something, I made some forward progress. And if you do have something that happens in your life, you go on a family vacation, or you have a wedding, or some event that sort of throws you off your game, you're able to bounce back, and you're able to sort of slip seamlessly back into code. And I think everybody's felt some shade of that along the way, right? I mean, that's just what it feels like when it's awesome, when you're learning, you're having fun, you're enjoying it, you're in the zone. The problem is the flip side, right? Failure feels a little bit different. Failure feels like you're trying, you're starting, it's like you're pushing the rock up the hill, but every time you look the other way, the rock comes floating right back, rolling right back down, probably over your foot along the way, right? It's where you feel like maybe you're working too hard, you're feeling sleep deprived, you can't remember anything that you're learning. You might actually feel completely lost. Maybe you've done this for a month, maybe you've done this for a year, but somewhere along that way you just don't feel like there's clarity around your purpose, there's clarity around your forward momentum. Another thing is that when you do actually sit down, maybe even when you fought for those hours, and you sit down and you have a 3-hour stretch in front of you, and you sit down and you just can't get your focus. You just for some reason, despite all of the trouble you went through to make that happen, you just can't put it together. And in the end of the day, the net of this is that it just feels like you're not making progress. And I think that everybody has, in some way, shape, or form, felt that along the way, right? There's a deep-seated frustration that's associated with this. The good thing is that you can do it. I want to just say that right up front, right? Is that everyone who's listening to this right now has probably experienced the feelings of success, Maybe that was right when you got started. Maybe it's been, ups and downs along the way. And I think everyone has also felt some of those feelings of failure, some of those frustrations, some of those challenges. And not only can you be successful, but you can be successful as a part-timer, as someone who's fighting to make the time to make this happen. And so that's the goal of today. I want to talk about how you bridge the gap and how you make sure that the how of your learning is going to allow you to get in there and make sure that you can be successful with that. But I want to hold on for a second before we keep going forward, and just say for a second, who am I? I'm Eric. I think hopefully a lot of you have received emails from me at some point, and I run the Viking Code School right now. And I originally founded the Odin Project a number of years ago, which is right now in more than capable hands of our moderators, Kevin and some of the others. Basically, I'm a nerd, I'm a teacher, and I do this because I love it. And Odin along the way has grown enormously. If you haven't checked it out, it's theodinproject.com. It's over 60,000 people. We've had a really vibrant community associated with it, and then Viking was started for about 2 years ago, and we've been guaranteeing jobs almost since the beginning. So along the way, I've spent a significant amount of time working with students. I've interviewed more than 1,000 students who've studied on their own, and whether it's as part of the admissions process, whether it's just talking to users, whether it's whatever it is, right? I've started to see a significant amount of patterns along the way, and got really curious about, not just, when a student comes to us, what happens the day that they come to us, but also starting to look backwards and saying, like, why have you been successful? Why have some of you gotten to the point where you've been totally firing on all cylinders when you finally get to us, and others have had much more trouble along the way. And so that's where a lot of this pattern matching has come in. So another thing that I want to say is that this is run via the Viking Code School. We're here, we love coding, we love teaching, and we do this because we want to help. So just as a thank you for all of you being here with us, I just wanted to say that we're actually going to give away 10 free one-on-one pairing sessions with our staff. And so what that basically means is you literally sit down, we'll jump into a hangout and code or ask questions, or we talk about the meaning of life, or whatever it is to you. That really is your time, and that's something that I want to say thank you, and we'll talk about how to go about making that happen a little bit later on. We're joined by a few other people. The one who's not currently pictured is Patrick, who's helping out from Viking. So you might see and hear him as well. I think you see him. He's over there. But you can hopefully recognize based on the pictures Trevor, who is an early Viking student, and we'll get to meet him a little bit later. Who learned while starting in a dev role. I don't know. You say hi if you want. And Sia. Yeah, and we'll be able to hear from Trevor and also Sia a little bit later. Sia's also someone who learned with us over at Viking, and she was doing all kinds of different things part-time while fitting it together, and has a really interesting story. So thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Sia, for joining us. So as far as the rest of this, it's all of you. And so again, this is for you. This is designed to be helpful. We want this to be as valuable as possible, and so definitely ask questions. So we have a lot of questions that we're happy to answer. Basically, there's a position in your app where you can type in a question. It should be pretty obvious, and we'll queue those up, and we'll get to those towards the end. So if you come up with a question, ask them along the way, and we're definitely happy to entertain them. So please participate. Let us know how we can be helpful. But so let's just talk about what we're going to do today. There's 6 things that we're going to cover. One is just another look at ways that you essentially can be unsuccessful. And then we're going to turn things around, and we're going to talk about how to be successful, how to actually bridge those gaps, fix those problems, and optimize your life for learning how to code on your own. The third thing we'll talk about is kind of fun, is just a series of best practices, tips, tricks, and gotchas along the way that we've learned from working with students. And if you have your own, feel free to share them as well. Definitely, it's something that we want to sort of compile best practices and knowledge in a way that honestly I haven't really seen a lot of this out on the web yet, and so some of these are my own personal hard-fought experience, and others have definitely bubbled up from the community over the years. The fourth thing we'll talk about is how you can do this as a part-timer specifically. Again, there are some unique challenges when coding can't be the number one priority in your life, and that's something that we really want to address specifically. The fifth thing, we'll talk to Trevor and Sia. You guys can hear their stories and get to know things that worked with them, did not work with them along the way. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps for you and how you can take this forward and apply it to your own lives. So there's a lot to cover. So I'm gonna dive right in. And again, if you have questions, feel free to just ask away. You can also say hi if you want, and we'll get started. So let's kick off talking about modes of failure. So how do you know if you're struggling? This is something that I briefly talked about in the intro, but I think one of the key characteristics is that you feel like you're relearning everything. And so again, if you're doing things part-time, this happens a lot, right? You get to the end of a week, and then you get to the beginning of the next week, and you feel like you have to start over again because you've forgotten it all. It feels like you're pushing the rock up the hill. There's no momentum. And then another failure mode is actually that you feel like you're always you're unguided. You're sort of being pulled by the gravity of the coolest, shiniest, newest thing that you read about on Hacker News. You go to a meetup and 3 people are talking about the newest JavaScript framework, so of course you have to go out and try that. And rather than focusing on the nitty-gritty fundamentals of data structures and algorithms, or even just object-oriented programming, you find yourself yanked left and right and pulled to try out all these new toys, which really means that you get this really broad, flat level of knowledge, but you never go deep on anything. And that means that flat level of knowledge starts to evaporate, kind of dry up when you're not using it. Another thing is, as I was saying, your knowledge is pretty flat, so you never seem to get beyond beginner. Another one is that you don't ever seem to finish projects along the way too. So if you're a serial non-completer of projects, I think that should be at least a yellow flag along the way. And another one is also this feeling, which I think is pretty familiar with just about everyone who started out getting pulled along with a lot of different resources, which is the feeling that you've put in the time, you've learned a bunch of stuff, but somehow it's not actually making you any closer to that specific goal that you have. And that your goal might be different. Your goal might be to work part-time. It might be just to build toy apps for yourself, or it might be to go and join full-time as at a tech company in Silicon Valley or in London or somewhere. It doesn't really matter, right? But basically, the net of that is that sometimes you can really put in a lot of energy and effort into the learning process and still somehow not feel any closer. And then finally is that you know that you like development, you know that you like to code, but when you sit down, you just don't really feel like you want to do it anymore. And so these are all signs that there are probably tweaks that you can make to your routine, or tweaks that you can make to your life to start fixing some of these things. And that's basically what we want to talk about. So the first thing is that it's not your fault, so don't worry. Everyone's felt these things, and they tend to be due to 4 common causes. The first is the path that you're on. The second is time and the idea of time. The third is focus, and the fourth is motivation. And those are 4 things that I'm going to talk about specifically over the next few slides here. And specifically, how do we be successful with each of those? So let's talk about the first one, which is path. And path is really about kind of a macro level distraction. It's about getting onto a reputable path and making sure that you're not just picking up knowledge piecemeal, that you're not going on and learning these MOOC courses, taking a course from Harvard over here and taking a Udacity course over there and a Udemy course over here. You need a path. And assuming that you have an outcome that you specifically want, you need to make sure that path is connecting very specifically to your outcome. You need to make sure that path isn't just about watching videos, that path actually does require you to build stuff. And ultimately, you need to make sure that you're going to enjoy it. And that's something that we will talk about. It may sound a little bit fuzzy, but it's really easy over time to forget that you actually love what you're doing, that solving problems is fun, that coding is fun, and you find that maybe you're not enjoying it as much. And so part of that is actually finding a path, is finding someone who can help you, who can get you to that outcome in a way that actually is enjoyable, that is fun, and that allows you to also as importantly, get some support along the way so that you're not just, out exposed to the elements in the desert as you're crossing it, right? That you do have a marker. And of course, I obviously come from a bias perspective. I mean, we put together a path at Odin. We have a very strong path at Viking. There are others out there like Free Code Camp does, and then there are more traditional boot camp programs. It's funny to call boot camps traditional at this point. The more, I'll call them the more traditional in-person boot camps. So there are a number of different paths, but I would say that what's important is that you get on a path, that you stop wandering around, that you find a path that will get you to an outcome. And as an aside, just always be a little bit skeptical about the way that they're marketed, because it's very easy for people to say that you can do this and get a job in nights and weekends for a month or two, and just use your better judgment there. So the second one we talk about is focus. Focus is basically, there are a couple of different kinds of focus. One is about just getting distracted, and the fact is, when you're learning to code, you need to be uninterrupted. There's just no two things about it. The way that I tend to visualize this is that when I'm coding, I feel like I'm building a sandcastle, right? So it's like every thought that I have, I start building it grain by grain by grain, and I'm constructing these elaborate structures in my head, right? Like building architectures, getting in the zone, thinking about how everything flows together. And as soon as someone comes in and asks you a question, or the kid starts screaming, or it's time your stop comes up, or whatever it is, that creates that distraction, it's like the wave comes in and washes the sandcastle away, and you're kind of left with these like formless bumps that you have to like painstakingly go back and recreate. There's no substitute for, you just have to get it in your head, right, that coding takes uninterrupted stretches of time, and you have to fight for that time. And not only that, but when you're in that time, you have to do whatever it takes to get in the zone. And the zone means not being distracted. It means turning off Facebook. It means turning off notifications, turning off your cell phone, shut email, get email out of your life, and do whatever it takes for you, the human, to get into that zone. And one thing that we will talk about a little bit is music. And I think that music, headphones. I mean, I'm wearing noise canceling headphones. That obviously that kind of depends on what you're willing to invest financially, but in terms of gear. But you don't actually need things like that. What you do need is to make sure that whatever it is in your life that gets you uninterrupted time, is you block that off. You just can't get away from that. Coding takes uninterrupted time. The other side is getting distracted. Is not about focus in the moment. It's about kind of macro level focus. It's about not getting sidetracked. And we talk about rabbit holes a lot, which is kind of this like getting pulled down the rabbit hole into Wonderland, right? Oh man, I found a blog post, or I read something on Hacker News, or there are some additional resources, and you start pulling the thread, and you wake up 2.5 hours later at the end of the time that you'd allotted for coding, and you've been trawling blog posts, you've been learning all sorts of things, and then you put your head up and you realize that actually that was completely worthless. You've gone completely off path, and what have you accomplished with your time, right? So really, I think a mental model that's really useful is think of anything that is not on your path, directly on your path, as an empty calorie, as just a sugar Twinkie. And Hacker News is sugar Twinkie. Blog posts are sugar Twinkies. Like anything, it may seem like it's really valuable, but you should really think of it as candy. And if you get that image into your head and you're like, I know that it's candy, at the very least, it'll prevent you from fooling yourself into thinking that you are learning. If it's not on your path, don't do it. And sometimes that just takes that time of getting used to using that mental model. A final thing with focus is that everyone's different, right? And old Socrates had it figured out, right? Know thyself is incredibly important here. And as a developer, as a geek, as a nerd, as a whatever it is that you are, hopefully you're super experimental as well, right? And you like solving problems. Well, treat yourself as a problem. And what that means is take a step back and think on a macro level. Was I focused? Why not? Run experiments on yourself. You can experiment with things like your diet. You can experiment with sleep. We'll talk about experimenting with time of day. Whatever it is, just treat yourself as an experiment and know yourself and know what works for you, and just you just have to be rigorous about putting yourself in that situation where you're going to make those things happen. The other mode of failure, which we can turn into success, is just the idea of time. And it's in the end of the day, it takes time to learn. There's no substitute, and you have to acknowledge that. And if you don't acknowledge that, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're going to expect quick wins, and your expectations and reality are going to be misaligned, and you're going to buy into all of those essentially the equivalent of get rich quick schemes, right? Where someone is selling you something and they say, oh, this will totally make you employable, or whatever the carrot is, right? You just have to acknowledge that there is a wealth of things that you need to learn. Um, and that's good because learning is fun. And yeah, it does mean that this is going to take longer than maybe you'd originally hoped. But like the journey is a good one. But you just have to acknowledge that and be patient. And if you make peace with that idea that this is just going to take some time, surprisingly, it helps a whole lot. And we've heard that a lot from students over the years. Is when they got away from this idea that it was something you could pick up in a weekend. Oh wait, it's something you can pick up in a month. Okay, it's a lifelong journey, and some of the biggest milestones are many months out. That just changes your ability to focus on this, and we'll talk about the marathon versus the sprint in just a little bit too. So speaking of different goals, right? So everyone has different goals. Everyone always asks, how long does it take to learn development? And nobody ever says because frankly it depends on an enormous number of factors. Toy apps. If your goal is basically I just want to build some toy apps that are kind of useful to myself, just little toys, fine. Like maybe it takes 100 hours. You go in there and you learn some basic stuff. You learn some scripting, and you can go in and you can do it. You can throw up a web page. It's not that big of a deal. If you want to actually build something useful, it probably takes several hundred hours. If you want it to be useful, you need to have some versatility. You need to have a little bit more fundamentals. A lot of you probably want to go out and do some casual freelancing. And I'm not talking about working for companies. I'm talking about kind of drumming up your own business, right? And going out building websites for people. Maybe your church group or causes you believe in. Some people who will pay you a little bit. Maybe something you can start to step upwards into a career, right? You can do that. It's going to take many hundred hours, and that's because you need more than just fundamentals. You also need experience, and you need best practices, and you need industry level knowledge. But if you want to be fully employed as a developer, if you want to pass the hiring screens, if you want to pass the algorithm and data structures questions, if you want to have good testing practices, all of these things, you're going to have to put in the time, and that's going to take more than 1,000 hours. And so we talk about that a lot. And the idea of 1,000 hours is a pretty significant amount of time. And you can do the math, and you can divide hours I'm spending per week out of 1,000. And if that's your goal, you just have to know it's going to take time, and that's okay. So in the realm of how do you make your time work better, cadence is a really, really important concept. And essentially what that is building up a heartbeat, building up a rhythm to your schedule that's unbreakable. And frankly, the more just like data, the more rigid and the more predictable that your schedule is, the more reliably you can fit yourself into it, and the better off you're going to be. So if life is crazy, if coding is important to you, if learning is important to you, you're going to have to ring fence it. You're going to have to chop out chunks of time on the schedule and fight to make them happen. And this, you should make it so that you hit the same times every week if at all possible. And the reason is as much because the more rigid it is, the less the more you can schedule around it in the future because that's your coding time. But also it helps build a habit, and there's something magical about building habits. That it's very, very hard to build a habit, but once you do, it's great because as I think I'll say probably in the future as well, a good habit makes you feel weird when you don't do it. So finally, on the time side is also acknowledging that there are hacks and some arbitrages, and one of them is getting help. So we've all sat down for 4 hours, and we've assaulted a tall wall of some sort of bug with utter futility, and smashed ourselves against it again and again and again, and stayed up far later than we should have, and all sorts of things, right? And maybe the next day you had the experience of being able to show it to someone else and have them go, oh, you forgot this, and then it's like your head explodes, right? And you realize that there's value in struggling, but you also need to recognize that being able to ask for help and being able to be somewhere where you can be supported is magical, because it shrinks your timeline down so much. Because 4 hours of if you don't have 4 hours to struggle on a bug, if that completely derails your entire week's progress, you need to be able to ask for help. You need to be able to hit a button and get over that speed bump before you start sliding back down. All right. Motivation is the final one. And motivation, we talked about outcomes and things like that. And there's this idea, I think it was actually Jim Collins in Good to Great. But he was the one who said that the BHAG is a very significant thing. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. And for everyone, that's going to be different. What was that?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. Basically you set a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is something that's kind of your over the rainbow. This is what I really want. This is what I'm really achieving, or this is what I'm really striving for. And having that, it gives you a sense of purpose that allows you to struggle through the pain and suffering. Because if you don't have that, if your goals are only an inch in front of your head, it's going to be very hard for you to get out of some of the deeper troughs as you go through the bumpy learning process. But then the other side, you can't just say, I'm doing this for the big goal and not have any wins along the way. So another thing that we've encountered a lot is the idea of small wins. Is how do you reward yourself when you've actually picked up something? How do you set milestones? How do you make sure that when you do accomplish something, that it's that you're going to feel good about it, that you can say like, oh, you can take a breath, you can if it's your thing, you could have a beer, you could do whatever it is. And as a developer, some of the best goals to reward yourself with are actually just building. I've learned this skill, so now I'm going to build an app with it. I get to play with it. I get to build a toy. I get to build a thing. And you can have that thing. And then once you have that thing, that gives you what you need motivationally to then take the next step and move into the next phase of your learning. So again, knowing that this is a long timeline, but along the way, it's really, really helpful to start setting yourself very measurable goals. At the end of this next 2 weeks, I wanna make sure that I've figured out RSpec testing. And when I do that, I'm gonna build tests around like my next little command line game is gonna have tests around it, and that's gonna be fun. Or if that's not your thing, maybe it's about JavaScript. It's about building a page that does something, or again, building a game. Sometimes games are fun, right? And hopefully all the time games are fun, and you can put that on your web page. So that's definitely a really, really helpful one, where you have to sort of have the long goal and the short goals, and if you get out of line with if you don't have both of those, it's going to be a tough journey to keep going on. And then the other thing is, of course, to remember we've talked about this a fair bit already. It's remember to enjoy the journey, and what that means is, if you're not enjoying it, think about why are you not enjoying it. Like, don't force yourself to do something that you absolutely hate, because then you're just going to end up hating it more. And most likely, if you're not enjoying it, it's for reasons that aren't entirely due to the material. Because if you imagine yourself, on vacation for a month or whatever it is, right, without anything else to think about, if you sat down and solved some of those same problems, you'd probably find them fun. Because you're here because you're a geek, right? You're here because you like solving problems. You're here because that's like interesting, right? Is creating things and solving things and working with things with your hands or your mental hands, whatever it is, right? And that's supposed to be fun. And so if it's not fun and you're not enjoying the journey, just think about why and try and figure out why, because you know that you love this stuff. So examine your level of burnout is something we're going to talk about in just a sec too. And finally, the best way to be motivated is to get support, is to have a community. That picture actually is our two brothers who are triathletes, and one of them basically almost collapsed, almost in sight of the finish line, I think, during a race, and his brother came in and pulled him over to the finish line. There's no substitute for the level of support that you can get from the community, and that's something that we hear a lot about, is like, how do I get engaged with the community? How do I find support? And that's going to be different depending where you are. Maybe that's Slack channels, maybe that's meetups, maybe that's IRC channels. Sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's in person. One thing I will say is that based on our experience, there's just no substitute for one-on-one. So what you really want is someone who cares, like someone who actually one-on-one will care if you fail or if you succeed, right? And so someone who can hold you accountable, with whom you can set a goal and have them go, why didn't you do that? right? And the same should be true with you and other people. So if you can find groups of either other beginners or mentors or even people who aren't at all related to development, right? That's going to be so important. And the other thing is you can set group goals, because you may be familiar with Parkinson's law, right? Which is that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So if you're not setting goals, you're going to take far more time than you otherwise would. So definitely support is one of the key factors. So now I want to talk about fun stuff. Maybe not fun stuff, but kind of like little hacks along the way. So those are the big things that we just talked about. You know, that you just have to get right in a macro sense in order to get all the ingredients ready to build yourself up for success. But there are lots of little things too. I think one of the most significant ones is burnout. So everyone who's done too much for too long knows the idea of burnout, knows what it feels like. Burnout is, and here's the thing: if this is the first time that you've overextended yourself like this, you may not be familiar with what burnout is, or you may be in denial that you're in burnout. It's really easy to be in burnout if you're working a full-time job and you're trying to code on the same time, and you've shut out other things in your life. And we'll talk about balance in a second. The symptoms of burnout are essentially just you try to sit down to work and you just can't. It's like you know that you're excited to do something and you literally just cannot turn your brain into it. It's not like you're distracted, or maybe you are, but it's just like something will not happen. It's like your brain is in revolt. Another thing is that you're chronically tired. You can be super distracted. It can feel like you have the strongest form of ADD possible, right? Where it's like you just cannot focus on the screen at all. You just keep shooting off in all directions. You find yourself, again, like, 30 pages deep on Wikipedia or something, and there's just no way. Or finally, again, we've talked about this before, so you just can't enjoy something that you know that you should be enjoying. How do you fix burnout? The fact is, it just takes time. And so sometimes if you've overextended yourself, if you've done too much with too little balance, it just takes time, and that sucks to hear. It's like being an athlete and being like, you've overstressed, like you're breaking your shins by running too much. You need to like sit out and ice yourself for a couple of weeks, right? Sometimes you just have to admit that you're just in too deep and you can't force it, and you need to take some time away. And also sleep. Sleep is hugely important, and I know your mom probably told you that, but like experientially we work with students who go through a very, very, very intensive immersive program again and again and again, and so we're really familiar with the symptoms of burnout and how to fix them. And one of the only cures is time, and one of the only other cures is sleep. You need to get a good night's sleep. Use your weekend, sleep in. Just let it go. There's kind of nothing else to it. Switching costs. Switching costs is something that it's oftentimes beginners aren't as aware of it. They think there's this impression that you can just sit down and then you can just turn on, right? And then you're like, all right, I've allocated an hour for coding. I'm gonna like put on the headphones and bam, I'm gonna be in it, right? Remember the sandcastle. It takes time. It takes time to build these things up. In all the experience that I've seen, it takes at least a half hour. It takes 30, 45, for some people up to an hour to actually get into the zone. And so what that really means, practically speaking, is that you can't break up your day into 1 hour batches. You need continuous time to code, and there's just no substitute for that. So essentially what that comes down to is don't fool yourself into thinking that it's not going to take you a half hour or more to get into the zone, and plan your schedule accordingly. Another good one is the 2-hour rule. So think about the times that you've spent late nights coding, and you've been turning over a problem, and you're sort of in that obsessive phase where you just literally cannot let it go. You know that you're strung out, but you're not optimal, but you're like, I'm too stubborn to let this go. And then you finally just pull the stop button, and you sit in bed at 4 in the morning with your eyes looking like this guy in the picture, right? Unfortunately, I have yet to find a hack that allows me to go to sleep within 2 hours of touching a text editor. Same thing is true with the learning side, right? And I've talked to a whole lot of people, and maybe I don't know, Trevor, and see if you guys have your own time or your own version of this, but it's I'm almost comfortable to the point of saying that it's a law that you just have to acknowledge that you're not going to fall asleep within 2 hours of touching code. Some of you may be exceptional sleepers. I don't know. I envy that. But for most of you, just acknowledge that you're not going to fall asleep within 2 hours of coding, and don't try. And you will dream of code if you do try. Finally, or maybe not finally, but a really important one is music. Not everybody codes with music. Uh, Best practice. Everyone's different, but best practice. Just find music that doesn't have words. Find music that has beats. Find music that has rhythm, that has structure to it. As for some people, that's classical. For some people, that's uh, I think you can get away with that around jazz. Frankly, I think the most popular among coders is electronic music, and there's a huge range, there's a huge spectrum of different styles of music, and it can be definitely one of the most valuable tools for getting yourself into the zone. I listen to electronic music. I have a playlist on SoundCloud. If you want to find it, I think I'm Eric-Troutman-1 on SoundCloud, and there's a coding beats. I have like 300 hour plus mixes that I've just collected from around that are all electronic music that I use to get into the zone. And you obviously you don't have to use my beats, but find the ones that work for you. Make sure they don't have words, because words are sort of distracting, because as soon as you get caught in the words, again, your focus gets pulled out. But use music, and there's this one hack that I figured out over the years, which isn't great for your hearing, but it can be surprisingly effective if you know you have to get in the zone. And basically what I do is I'll turn up the music as loud as I can sort of comfortably work with. Well, not even comfortably, just kind of, it's just loud. I turn up the music very loud, and I start trying to work, and I start, because I'm distracted, I'm out of the zone. I try to let work, and I start to find that the super loud beat music actually kind of like, it's like it beats the brain into submission, and I start getting in the zone, and then I find myself just turning it down because I'm like, well, now the music's distracting, because now I want to work, and now I'm working, and I find that I'll just keep turning it down over a period of maybe 10 minutes or something, and then I'm in the zone, and then I realize I'm in the zone, the music's at a normal level, and I'm like, I'm good to go. So that's a hack that I've learned over the years. Use as much as you can. A final one is our Viking newsletter. If you're not signed up for that, you can do that on the Viking homepage. We send out a few songs every week, or a few tracks, or a few playlists every week that you could take advantage of on the music side. All right, another good one is, are you a morning person or are you a night person? So a really good piece of advice that we got from one of our students was the idea of coding when you're happy. So it's not even just being happy when coding. It's making sure that you're coding at a time of day when you're going to be happy, because I don't know if you're familiar with Pavlov's dogs and the experiments around where essentially you ring the bell and the dog starts salivating because you used to ring the bell and it meant food, and then you take away the food, you ring the bell and the dog salivates. There are a lot of associations that get built. If you force yourself to code when you're unhappy and you're strung out and it's a time when you're not good at coding, you're just going to associate coding with that feeling of pain and suffering. Figure out when you're happy. I'm a morning person. I will wake up at 5 a.m. and take down some coffee and just love my life getting into something. The opposite is true at night. Not a night person, right? And a lot of developers are completely the opposite. They're totally night people. So just know which one you are, and then when we're talking about schedule, make sure that your schedule reflects that. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But so just again, it's sort of know thyself. Don't try to fool yourself. If you're not a morning person, good luck to you trying to wake up and enjoy coding in the morning, right? The same is true at night. All right, the final thing I wanted to talk about in terms of kind of a tip, trick, and best practice is just that quality is very rarely free. So you generally get what you pay for, and the most important thing that you tend to pay for when you get high quality resources or you get high quality support is time. Right, and so if you have the time to work with what you have, that's fine. You can win a marathon, or you can run a marathon with just a pair of running shoes, right? But if you want to train with a team and get a coach and actually win it and train in the most efficient way possible, sometimes that takes resources, and so sometimes you have to pay for something that's good. All right. Finally, before we get to meet Trevor and Sia, is how does this apply to you as a part-timer? And so I think one of the most important things about you being a part-timer is that you don't have time to waste. So all of this applies essentially 10x, right? You have to be so careful to block off time that actually, that you can fight for. Um, Routine and cadence are really the king. It's figure out what your routine is and bake coding into it. Make coding something that like has to exist. It cannot be moved, right? And do it every Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Saturday morning, right? And just stick to it. And specifically weekends because you have to get that uninterrupted long period of time to actually get into a problem. It's far to your advantage to have 1 8-hour day as opposed to 4 2-hour days. I mean, there is some give and take a little bit, but if you want to build a project, and you want to get into the zone, 1 8-hour day will always be better than 4 2-hour days. So weekends are really key. So use your weekends well. But on the other side, don't blow out your weekend. Don't spend 30 hours coding your Saturday and Sunday while working a full-time job and have no time to see your friends, have no time to see your family, have no time to go out. Because again, this takes time, and you can do that. I mean, you can lock yourself in a room. Maybe you did that with your dissertation. Maybe you've done that in finals week, whatever it is, right? Uh, you, but if you don't take time off, you're going to burn out, and burnout's going to happen. And if you don't feel like your life is balanced, again, it's you're not going to win the marathon. You're going to burn out. So just be conscious of yourself and be good to yourself and pick your battles. Relax. So there's always going to be a bit of a give and take around this idea of setting a very rigid schedule. So time box, time box, time box. You know, break out that time in the morning at 5 a.m. before you leave for work, which maybe that's your best time, and you want to save that for coding. Do whatever you have to do, but at the same time, if you're making breakfast with your kids and you're going to be distracted, don't bother coding. Just acknowledge that you're not gonna get in that zone. Don't try to fight it. Pick your battles and forgive yourself if you mess it up, right? So and don't watch TV. Never code distracted. That was I think one of the biggest ones that everybody has to learn. So all right, you've heard too much of my voice, and you'll hear a little bit more. But I wanted to give you guys a chance to just talk to or hear from a couple of students who've gone through and done this on a part-time basis. The first is Trevor, who can tell you far better about himself than I can. So Trevor, I'd love to first of all thank you again for joining us, and I'd love to hear from you about how was your journey of learning how to code while balancing an insane amount of stuff.
Yeah. So my journey was pretty interesting. I had the luxury of actually being able to talk to my employer, and they kind of put me through Viking, so they knew what I was going through and they knew what I was doing, so they were able to be a bit more flexible with me, which was really good. But yeah, it was hard and it was a lot. There were a lot of days I would go to the office, code a little bit after work, go home, try to do something, end up coding more, or end up missing code. But yeah, kind of going back to what Eric was talking about, I wanted to mention the things that worked for me while I was doing it. And Eric hit a bunch of them, but there were a few that I wanted to point out too. But being consistent was super important for me. The way I did it was I was less rigid in terms of I'm going to code from these hours, but more rigid in terms of I'm going to get something done every day. Just as long as there was some kind of progress, I wanted to get a little bit done, and that was what seemed to work for me. In terms of actually scheduling that kind of stuff, I had to be flexible. There were some weeks when my job was going to be super busy, and I would know that ahead of time, and I knew that coding was going to take a hit. So in those situations, you have to be realistic. There's just no way that you're going to be able to, I was working 60 hours some weeks. There was no way that I'm going to be able to code as much as I wanted to those sorts of weeks as well. So being flexible with yourself, and like Eric said, kind of just being gentle, not getting down on yourself when you're in those situations. It's going to happen, and you know that this is going to take time, so that's okay. A couple of tricks that I kind of used as well, which I really liked. There were a couple of days where I had some days off that I needed to take, and I didn't really have anything that I had going on that day, I would just take a day off from work and just do Viking stuff. It was great. I would not have to go to work. I could wake up when I wanted to. I would get my code done, and then I could still, if it was a Friday I would take off, I'd still be able to go out with my friends or do whatever. I was in New York at the time, so there was plenty to do. That was great. Another thing that I found for me was not working from home as much as possible. It was really distracting if I would just sit at my desk all day and kind of just get stuck there. So I would try to go to a coffee shop. I would even work from my home or my office, like where my job was. That seemed to work a lot better for me than just sitting in my tiny one-bedroom New York City apartment all day and getting saddened by the lack of light or the jackhammers outside. So that seemed to work a lot better for me. And the other thing that I did that I thought was really good was when we were doing projects or something like that I found really interesting. You obviously want to finish your projects and finish your lessons, but what I would try to do on some occasions is stop before, like kind of when I was in the middle of something intentionally, so that way the way my brain works is when I would stop that, my brain would still think about that until the next time I was able to do it. And so that the next time I would jump back in that 30 to 45 minute, heat up session that Eric was talking about. I've kind of been in that the whole time since I stopped coding last time. So it made it a lot easier to jump back in just because I was churning that through, you know, from the last coding session. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I could say is you got to be flexible with yourself. You got to be realistic with yourself. It can totally be done. Going through Viking, coding and having a full-time job, but you just have to be realistic with yourself.
Thanks a lot, Trevor.
Yeah.
And you guys are welcome to ask him questions when we get to all the questions as well. So feel free to queue them up now if you'd like. Also wanted to hear from Sia, who had a slightly different situation. Trevor, you were working a full-time job, right? While you were doing this, and then Sia, you were working a whole lot of different things at the same time. So we could hear from your experience as well.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I could be somewhat of a hustler. I don't know if my profile was on there, but I was teaching part-time, but also doing contract work part-time. I have experience in business and strategy also. And so I'd pick up projects doing that. I also sell crochet patterns online, so they're real estate. So there's a lot of different things. But it kind of reminded me of a point of I had these things going, and if you're trying to both maintain any kind of job or your other responsibilities in life, you will have to make some cuts, like simplify your life, figure out the things that are the most important and keep those, and then some of the things you'll just have to let go temporarily, and that's okay, and be okay with that. A few other things I could think of that can't emphasize enough all the things that Eric said, but maybe a few additional pointers. But building, for me, I think I'm more of a practical learner. I learn much more doing things, and I also get a lot more personal fulfillment when I build things, like, oh, look at this thing that I made, and that makes me excited. And so build as much as possible. Don't just try to learn things or read things. Actually build things. Even if they end up being crappy, you're like, whatever, it was this thing that you made, and that's kind of awesome. And be proud of it. Show your mom or parent or whatever. They'll look at it and they'll be impressed. And then this thing on distraction and focus. I've actually been researching this more. I'm a nerd in more than one way, but I like to think of productivity. Maybe because I was also an operations and supply chain consultant. Yeah, I've done too much. Clearly, I get distracted. But it's really interesting. I was reading some of this research, and it's not just external distractions. We actually self-interrupt ourselves. They've watched people working, and we end up self-interrupting. And part of this could be because we do it when we're not at peace or in equilibrium. Maybe you're frustrated for something, but at something that you're doing. And so what you do is you literally, for no apparent reason at all, you'll just go check your email. And there's no need for it, but you're doing it because you're kind of like out of your equilibrium, or you're not happy, and so you're doing it to kind of like, avoid what you're trying to do. And so it's just really interesting reading these things. So if you feel like you're kind of overwhelmed with, like, oh, you feel like you have to catch up on all social media, read like all the blog articles, or you self-interrupt. I did this one podcast. It was really interesting. It's by Note to Self. They have a regular podcast, but it was this one specific series called Info Magical. So that was really interesting. And I did some, I don't know, there was some fun little exercises in there. Like I KonMari'd my phone. Like my phone, there's like, when I open it, there's no apps. There's like 2 things at the top, and all I see is my picture. And so it's less about, it's more task oriented. I don't open it and get distracted. I just do what I was meant to do, but I'm also pleased by the picture I see. But also, what else? This is some motivation for later, but what I've realized now, not that I'm super experienced yet, but even experienced devs don't know it all. Like every week, I'm working with someone who's like way more experienced than me, and there's something that I find that I actually know better than them. So it's like everyone knows what they know. And so you can't get too caught up in, oh, I don't know everything. Oh, I don't consider myself a web developer or software engineer, whatever you want to call yourself. You will know things better than some other people, and they will know some things better than you. And don't sell yourself short. Like you're learning the whole time. Going through this process, you will learn how to learn. And this is the kind of job that you can't just stop learning. I mean, you can, but then you'd be a really crappy engineer. But and so you're going to be great. You're going to have plenty of opportunity to learn more things. If you're anywhere in the JavaScript world, you will realize you can never learn all the things because they keep coming out with new things. So you just have to get over that. You're not going to learn them all. But yeah, I think those are my extra tips. Oh, and get involved socially. I go to meetups, and don't go when you need a job. Start getting involved and meeting people and working with them before you need it, because then it's natural. It's not like networking. It's actually just naturally getting to know people, and then they learn about you. I hate traditional job searching, and so I think I applied to like a total of 3 jobs. That's not a good strategy, but like you want more of the pull thing, but you can do that when people start to learn about you, like volunteer to do talks even if you think you can't do a good one. When you teach something, you learn it better, but then there's always beginners out there, and there's ways that you can get involved and participate more, and yeah, people will learn about you. But also it's social. I mean, maybe because I live in New Orleans and we drink weekly. It's called Hack Night, but we don't. We just socialize. Okay, sorry. Those were my tips.
Thanks. Yeah. You actually reminded me of something that I don't know why I didn't say it explicitly. I kind of danced around it, and it's something I talk about so much in my personal life, which is the idea of airplane mode. I am the most productive human being in the world on an airplane because there's no Wi-Fi, there's no email, there's no text notifications, and the best thing that I figured out how to do. First of all, email is the mind killer.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Slack is worse, actually, but yeah.
Slack's yeah, we can put them both, right? But they are the mind killers, and if you have either of those open, and if your phone is in a way that you're actually going to read it, you failed. So just acknowledge that you failed and don't even try. Airplane mode is really the only way to do it as best you can. Definitely something to go forward with. So thank you, Sia and Trevor. Again, you guys can ask them questions if you'd like. And speaking of, let's talk about what the path forward looks like. So first of all, queue up your questions. So one thing that we mentioned was that we want to give a bunch of you guys a chance to talk to us one-on-one, code with us. The first 5 people who we answer questions from will be the ones who get the free one-on-one. So please queue up a bunch of questions, and Patrick will definitely read them through and let us know. So anything you have questions on, happy to learn. We might go a little bit over time on the questions, but that's okay. And while you guys are doing that, I just want to take a brief moment and just mention Viking itself, right? Because this is obviously something that I've thought about a lot, that we've thought about a lot, all of us. Learning part-time is really hard, and we've really invested a lot of energy, time, iterations in figuring out how to do it. So the whole point of what we're doing here at Viking, specifically with our new Flex program, is that you bring the motivation, and we've figured out how to get you there. So the idea is our Flex program is essentially the the result of many years, many years of learning how to learn and learning how to work with people. Right now, it's in pre-launch. It's something that basically what it is it's a chance for you to take the core Viking curriculum on a part-time basis. We're sort of known for our immersive program because we have a deferred fee structure as the only online program that actually does that. And the Flex program now allows you to do that to take the same curriculum that we perfected through the immersive on a part-time basis. It's something that, because it's pre-launch, we wanted to let you guys know first. So we haven't really been getting it out there too aggressively. And specifically, we also wanted to let you know that space is limited, so we're only bringing in 8 students a week right now. It is a professionally supported program. You can learn all about it on the website, and really it's designed to allow you to dial in exactly the level of support that you want. So if you're going through at 20 hours a week, you have different needs as someone who's going through at 80 hours a week, and so we have different programs that allow you to actually dial in based on your budget, based on your time, exactly what you want. And that's something that we hadn't seen ever out there before, and so pretty excited to bring that to you guys. And then of course the kicker is that the other 5 students who we'd love to work with one-on-one, the first 5 of you who enroll in the program from the webinar here are in, we're going to also give you a bonus session for working with us. So we'll tell you at the end. I'll tell you at the end how exactly you make that happen. But yeah, the first 5 to enroll will get free one-on-ones. So if you're new to Viking, basically the way that you can figure out more is, first of all, check out the prep work. Our prep work is, whether you're new to development or not, it's something that no other program does. Everyone has prep work, but no one teaches you about design as well. No one teaches you how to be an engineer, how to pseudocode, how to work on an agile development team, what user interface design is, all sorts of things that you would never have learned before. And the coolest thing about that is not just do you learn a set of new skills that are something that you wouldn't necessarily pick up in the linear path of learning how to code, and which are super valuable to you if your goal is to be a full engineer. But you also get to try us out. It's free. There's nothing more to it. So if you haven't already, check out the prep work. It gives you a good sense of the way that we communicate, the voice that we use. It's not identical to the core curriculum, because the core curriculum is almost 100% custom and built from the ground up. But it really, if you feel good about the prep work, you'll probably like us, in the real program. If you're already in the prep work, as we mentioned, the Flex program is one that we've just started bringing out here, and so you can check out more about that at vikingcodeschool.com/flex. So just wanted to let you guys know about that, and we're really excited. So I want to work with you. I talk to every single student who enrolls in the program, every single student who has ever enrolled in the program, and I want to meet you as well. And we'll do that if you sign up. So let's hit those questions. Patrick, who are our 5 questions?
Yeah, we've had some great ones coming in here. I'll start with one from Carlos, and he asked earlier in the presentation, when do you think is a good time to stop? So if you set a certain amount of time for yourself to be coding, say 2 hours or however long you've decided, and then you hit a roadblock and you start to get frustrated, what do? Should you try to push through that frustration and risk getting even more frustrated, or take a pause, stop for a while, and come back to it?
Okay, so what I'll say first of all is Sia and Trevor, you guys are more than welcome to chime in on any of these. Definitely.
I know for me, I like to step away, like go for a walk, something like that, to help clear my head. Because if I'm not too frustrated, but I'm still just debugging, I'll sit there and I'll work through it. But if I'm starting to get frustrated, walking away, doing something else, not something that's like mentally intensive, but like going for a walk or something like that. That really helps me refresh, and then I come back to it and I see something that I totally wouldn't have seen before. Or if it's late, I'll go to sleep, and the next day I'll see it like that was stupid, whatever I was doing.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say, just like for me too, Sia, like it's generally if I'm stuck on something for like half an hour or more, like the same kind of thing, and I'm not making progress, and it's arbitrary. If you feel like you're not making progress, I'll do the same thing and just like go get a coffee, go talk to someone, just get out of that staring at this code mindset and focus on something else for a little bit. That seems to help.
Well, you can also the rubber duck thing. I do this with
Mhm.
people though, and like people are my rubber ducks. But it's this idea that you try to explain it to someone else, and they don't have to know how to code at all. Just like try to explain the problem to them, and in that process, you'll end up finding the error. It's bizarre and kind of sad, but yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that. I mean, I kind of think of it like, the tea kettle that gets hotter and hotter and hotter and starts boiling. The best thing you can do is ask someone else, is talk to someone else. So when you get to that point of frustration, that's like opening the lid and letting all the steam out in a nice, happy way, right? You talk to someone else and they're like, oh, what are you doing? You forgot a semicolon, right? And your head kind of wants to explode, but then like the pressure level falls. But I will say that the destructive angle on that is that, and you have to do this a bunch of times before you start to recognize this pattern in yourself. Usually it happens late at night for me. If I get stuck on something, is I know, like, I get the tunnel vision starts coming in. That's one of the symptoms, is tunnel vision. It's just knowing and feeling this sense of obsession, this loop of just being like, this is like, I have to, and you start focusing an error, and like you've kind of already lost at that point, and you're just gonna have to stand up and walk away. And unfortunately, it kind of sucks if that happens halfway through a session, which is why it's really important if you do have someone that you can either rubber duck with or reach out to, or to ask questions of, or get like real development help from. Like that's definitely your best eject handle. But if not, get up, take a walk, clear your head. I know it'll probably knock your sandcastle down, but you were stuck somewhere in a maze. I think that's the best I have. Thanks a lot, Carlos. What else do we have, Patrick?
From Christopher, and actually this question has come from a number of people. How do you know when you're ready to work as an industry or enterprise level developer? So, in other words, when is your education done and you can transition to looking for a job and working for real industrial level companies?
I mean, I think that's for me. I don't know. It was kind of tough. So what I would do, I would end up. I had some clients that I would try to work with freelance, and what I would do. This might not be the best thing. So Eric, if I'm talking in a different way, stop me. But I would always try to bite off way more than I could chew. So if there was a client where it's like, we want this app built, it's like, okay, I can do that. In reality, do I know how to do it? Not quite, but I think I can figure out how to do it. And that was, in some of the ways, the way that I learned the most. I would, now I've given my kind of word that I'll be able to do this, and it would motivate me a lot more to kind of do that. So at least for me, I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule as to when you're ready to do that. When you're ready to do that, I guess it's when you feel ready to be able to take those on. And if you can force yourself to do that, maybe you can, but that's what I did for a little bit.
Very nice.
Hang on. I actually wanted to add some. Yeah, so I agree. It's also a really good motivational technique to set a goal, like an audacious goal that you're. In the early 2000s, we used to call that vaporware. So you gotta be a little careful selling something that you can't make, but it is a really good technique. As far as when are you ready, I think there are checklists of skills on a baseline, right? That you do need to know certain things, and that's not necessarily arguable. And then there are some that some people will argue and others won't. But if you're looking for a clear checklist where you say you get to the end and then you flip the switch and then suddenly you're employable, that's not really in the spirit of what it means to be a developer. I mean, being a developer is a gradient. It's a grayscale. It's you need foundations. Yeah, you need to get up to a certain hurdle rate. But then there's this gray zone where everyone is always learning. Like Sia was just talking about, nobody has it figured out. Nobody knows everything, and really, once you've mastered the art of learning how to learn, and that's something that Trevor was talking about as well. He's over here to me. I don't know where he is to you. Um, once you've mastered this art of learning how to learn, then you can have the confidence to be able to say, oh, I can deliver on this promise. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I know that I can learn to fill in the gaps. So confidence in your learning style is actually, I think, at least as important as having a specific skill, and being like, oh, I know Rails, or oh, I know how to build a React app, or oh, whatever it is, right? But then, and so that's one side of this, and then the other side is also you're employable when someone's going to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a market. Like in the end of the day, like I know you want to feel confident. One thing, you'll never feel confident all the way. Like if you got to the point where you feel so confident that you know that you're ready, you've waited way too long. There's no like wrong. Yeah, or your confidence and abilities may be in some sort of misalignment. But always take the risk. Take 2 steps further than you think you should. Apply for the job. Talk to the people. You're never going to feel ready. Again, if you have confidence in your ability to learn, then that's all you need, and you can fill in the gaps of the rest. And if someone is actually going to pay you, more, then you win. Then you are officially employable when they can pay you. So just keep trying until that point, and keep getting better as you're trying. Thanks a lot.
I will say there was an interesting talk. I think it was a PyCon. You can just Google this. It's something like the fallacy of the brilliant programmer. It was a really good talk. Not just basically saying that there's no way all programmers are brilliant. So feel better about yourself. But also it talked about like if you are maybe not a white male. No offense to my other panelists. I'd also talked a little bit about that too. So no, but yeah, it was not all programmers are brilliant, and so and yeah, the people that I've seen that have gotten hired here definitely like different levels. There's also different job opportunities. So totally agree with you're ready when someone's willing to pay you.
Yeah. Which also brings up another thing, which is that some skills, you might have skills in one area that are completely different than what other people would say, like you have to do X, Y, Z to get employable as a certain type of engineer. So anyways, yeah, let's hit another one.
Yeah, from John, and a number of people have asked this similar question as well. How do you transition from coding along with a tutorial or a video or some other learning device to being able to code mostly from memory, working on projects? How do you make the transition between those two?
I Google stuff every day.
Oh man.
And I at least 5 times, and then finally I remember it. I click on the same Stack Overflow question 5 times because
they're all purple.
Memory. Yeah, exactly. All the links are purple.
I've asked this before. Yeah. Yeah, I also just I use Alfred for that too with a custom, you can type in just PHP or Ruby or whatever and then the function and just do it automatically so you don't have to go to whatever the documentation is every day. But yeah, I don't think any programmer codes from memory completely. If you do, that's props to you. That's crazy.
Or maybe you memorize too much. Time to learn something new.
Yeah, I talk about this. I think probably many of you have read this by now. That's the cliff of confusion in a lot of ways. It's this. You've sort of gotten out of this. Everybody's held your hand up to a point, right? You've done tutorials, feel like you know what you're doing, and then you just go over the edge as soon as you have to actually build stuff on your own, right? And frankly, there aren't a lot of easy answers, but it kind of sucks to say, but the way to learn how to build is to build.
Yeah.
And to get off the tutorials, and the cool thing about tutorials is you have an example app sitting next to you, so you can see some best practices. So it's actually good to do a tutorial and have that. But then you gotta take on a project that stretches you a little bit, and even if it forces you to fill in some of the gaps, right? The best projects are the ones where you know how to do 75% of it, and then you have to learn the other 25%, and then you kind of do this turtling thing where what is it, frog jumping, where you jump up into the next project, right? Which is that you only know 70% of, and then you kind of learn to fill in the gaps, and you do a new project, and then you learn to fill in the gaps. So I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to get going.
But I also would say like building, you become when you're doing a tutorial, you're not necessarily motivated to do this, but once you start building it, you're like, oh, it'd be cool if I could do this. And then you start researching that thing and you figure out how to do it. And so you end up learning more in like an intrinsic motivation way, and it doesn't feel like you're studying because you just want to make it better and you're like, oh, this is cool. You can also get a little frustrated because you try to do too much. But you really learn a lot by building. I can't say enough about that. Even if it's stupid things that are very useful, just build it.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the next one, I also want to address one of the fallacies, which is the idea that you just know things, that you memorize things. There are two core skills of being a developer: learning and debugging. Everything else, like you have a baseline knowledge that it's like just because you know the words of English doesn't mean you can speak, right? Or it doesn't mean that you can communicate. Um, uh, it's you have to learn the fundamentals, but really like your skills are debugging and reading documentation, debugging and learning, and yeah, exactly. So it's you're always going to be having to go out and learn and learn and learn and debug and debug and debug. So don't get too discouraged that there isn't some magical point where you get off the tutorials and you can magically fly away and build a bunch of stuff. A lot of magic. What's next, Patrick?
Start building right away. Don't wait. Like you can build something that's just analogous at that level, but don't wait.
So the next question from Jason, and this is for our panelists, and Eric, if you want to jump in with your experience from students, how long does it take from the very start of a coding education to your first employment?
How long does it take from when you first start? I don't know. It really depends on what you're looking for, I think. And before I even came to Viking, I was coding for maybe like 3 or 4 years before that. But that was kind of why I went to Viking, was because it wasn't as structured, or I wasn't learning in a way that I really wanted to. And at that point, there was no way I was going to really get a job as a developer the way that I wanted to be. So, I mean, at the very least, to get to the level of developer that I wanted, it took at least a year before I was kind of confident in myself to take on those sorts of projects. But I'm sure Eric will say the same thing, but it really depends on the situation completely.
Sia, did you have anything? Or?
I mean, I've seen a variety. It also depends on what kind of like level of job or what type of work you're interested in. Yeah, like if you go partially through and you realize maybe you don't necessarily want to do as much coding, but maybe more like build WordPress things, you could probably start out with less experience. Or if you just want to do like HTML, CSS, of course you should probably also learn more design principles and things, which is another path. You could start out maybe a little bit earlier, but I don't know. Yeah, I would say it varies. It also depends your pace, though. It's highly dependent on your pace. So if you end up having more time on your hands to go through the curriculum faster, then I definitely feel at the end of the Viking curriculum, you're prepared to get a full-time job. But and so if you're lucky enough to have some of that extra free time and you can get through it in 4 months, 6 months. Well, 4 months is like full-time, right? If you can do like 6 months or 8 months, like you could totally get a job at that point. I started trying to get jobs before then, but they were, like I said, hustler, like small jobs. Or like you did a little bit of this too, like a little bit of freelancing or doing some other things, like I was teaching to code too, and so, yeah.
Well, and I think that's just to jump off what Sia was saying, you can start looking for jobs whenever. Like, there's nothing stopping you for that. Even when I stayed with the same company and just transitioned to a developer here, but I looked for other jobs while I was at Viking just to see what they were asking, see what more I could learn, to see what kind of tools they were using, what languages they were using, that kind of stuff. So you can start applying for jobs, and you might not get to the interview section for a few months or until you start to learn some more things like that. But I think that's a great strategy for learning a bit more, is just go apply for every job you can find on Stack Overflow in your area and start learning through the interview process too, and you'll inherently find out what they're looking for.
I think I'll close by putting the giant asterisk on all of this, right? And nobody answers this question because it's a really hard question to answer. It's like, how long is it going to take me to become employable? That's extremely hard, and that's why, I mean, if you imagine if they airdropped a bunch of tablets into a country where they'd never seen the internet before, the learning curve would be completely different than someone who's grown up with it, which is completely different than someone who's not just grown up with it but also been hacking on their computer, which is different than someone who's been doing that and also developing websites for their friends, right? So what you come in with is going to affect this. The technical bent of your mind is going to affect this, but also the things, and some of those things right now you don't have control over. That's your past. You're starting from where you are. Today is a new day. You are where you are, and you can start from a very low level of knowledge and get up very quickly. But you have to be extremely hungry. You have to be extremely curious, and you have to have the things that we've talked about today. Have a very clear path. Make sure that you're optimizing for large chunks of time, so you're not wasting time with switching costs and things like that. And you just and then that's where we start to get to these numbers like 1,200 hours, which is what we estimate that Viking takes in this sort of like big, just put your finger up in the air and guess, right? It's plus or minus according to all sorts of factors. Hopefully that gives you as much of a good sense as we can. No one else answers the question, so we might as well take a stab at it, right? What's our fifth one here?
Last question.
Oh, fifth one. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll have a bonus question.
Oh, we have lots of questions, but so I'll batch two together. This one was from Sheena, and others asked too. How does Flex, or the Viking Flex program, differ from something like Udacity? Others have asked, how does the Flex program differ from the Odin project? And I'll throw in, especially for Eric, how many people know about the Flex program right now? So if you can kind of
you're bombarding me with all sorts of things. So the program has been around. Actually, I think Trevor, you were one of our very first students. That was probably almost 2 years ago at this point, year and a half ago,
Early
I guess.
2015, yeah.
Yeah. And so we actually started running the program before the first immersive full-time cohort with a deferred fee had actually started, but we'd announced it because we had people like Trevor, students coming to us and saying, like, we want this, we want to learn, but we have jobs, what do we do? And we started crafting the program around that, around student demand. And so that was essentially a private beta, where we were handpicking students based on them coming to us and working with them directly. And so that's something that we were doing over time. More recently, we've opened it up into a public beta, and now we're in sort of the slow launch process where we're really ramping that up. So I don't know how many people know about it, but we haven't been shouting it from the mountaintops, and that's again, part of this is that today we wanted to this is kind of the first baby step forward for us, is letting you guys know about it, because we have a limited capacity right now. We want to kind of open it up to the communities that have been really good to us, Viking and Odin, and the folks out on Twitter and things like that. So how is the program different? I wish I was better versed in some of the particulars of programs like Udacity's and things like that. I can say how it's different from Odin. We do have some information about that on the website in the frequently asked questions section. But I mean, Odin is a path, and Odin is there's a community around Odin. Odin is a path. It's a path that's built around existing resources. And with Viking, what we've done is we've built everything from the ground up, completely from scratch, or almost completely from scratch. Probably like 98% brand new. And that means that I think Odin has something on the order of maybe 300 lessons and projects. The Viking course is at this point, I think, at something over 1,000. So the level of breadth, the level of depth and customization is much different. And we have a whole team of people working on it nonstop, working with students going through it. And it's a curriculum that and this also compares to other programs. It's the curriculum that we use when we are guaranteeing a job. So we know we don't just say that. I mean, we have to live and die by that. And so that means that this is a living curriculum. That's one that every single day we have to modify. And that's not the same is not true of other programs that don't have that level of accountability to their outcomes. So our immersive program, we have to live and die by that. And on the guaranteed tier of the Flex program, we have to live and die by that. So I think just in terms of the quality of the curriculum and then everything we have to build around it to support it, it's just not comparable to what else is out there. And then in terms of the actual ability to take the program, that was another thing. Is a lot of these other programs out there. Again, I won't single out any particular one, but they tend to offer a single thing that you should do at a single typically expensive price point, and if that fits into your life, great. But for many people, they need something with a little bit more shades of gray, and that's what we're able to offer, because we have the basic level, we have standard level, and we have the guaranteed level, which allows you to sort of choose based on what is your budget, what is your time, how exactly do you want to be supported. So at the very basic level, at least everyone has that ability to hit the help button and say, I need some help. I'm hour one of a potential 4-hour error, and I need some help. And so you can sort of throw the flag, and we can do that. And I think that's something that being able to opt into that at a lot of different levels is very different. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Do you, Patrick?
I would say, I did it for the depth, and some of the things I compared to that I'd seen otherwise or experienced otherwise, including Udacity and some others. I feel like Viking had a lot more depth, and that's what I was looking for. Like, I wasn't interested in doing a program that didn't teach me at a level that I felt like I'd be confident coming out of. I knew I liked coding, and I wanted to go deeper. And then I don't know at what level you get a mentor, but the mentor was a key winner for me, having that support and someone to keep me accountable.
And just the Slack group, honestly, like being able to go on, it's like, guys, am I crazy? I've never seen this error before. Can someone please help me? And then, like Eric said before, it's like, yeah, why are you doing that there? That's not supposed to be there. Oh, okay, yep, you're right. Thank you very much. Carry on. Or you write it out and immediately feel like an idiot because you wrote it out and you answered your own question just immediately. But yeah, getting access to that is phenomenal.
And you're also crazy.
Yeah.
Well, actually, something that we do kind of take advantage of also is the idea of what's the difference between a program that's one size fits all and a program that's not. And pretty definitively, what we've done at Viking is say that you can either design a program for everybody out there to be able to get their feet wet and get into, or you can design a program that has a particular outcome in mind and is not designed for everybody. It's designed for the students who are going to challenge themselves, who want to be able to learn by building things from scratch and not get helped by a bunch of starter code and not be copying and pasting a bunch of stuff, and who are willing to go through the challenge and ask for help when they need to along the way to get to the point where they can get to that professional standard. And so, it is hard. It's deep. It goes more than a lot of these programs that are sort of, just click a button, sign up, and you're in, right? Not all of our programs are an application process, but I do talk individually to every single student who comes in to make sure it is a good fit, to make sure that, you understand that that this is going to be hard, you're going to struggle, and that's okay, and that's normal, but, it has to be, you have to kind of want that and be willing to work for it. So we have 5 questions. We've also gone well over our time, for which I apologize. Maybe we can end with one bonus question, and then what we'll do is for everyone who has a question that we haven't been able to answer, we'll go through these and we'll compile them, and I'll try to answer as many as I can, and we'll send those out as part of the email afterwards to follow up and make sure that at the very least you're able to get those. And so before we get to the last question, I will say just if you are looking for additional stuff, at the end of this, we'll be sending out the video. We'll send out a course syllabus as well if you want to take it. And if you have additional questions, you can send it to hello@Viking Code School. So if we have one last question, let's do that before we get out of here, and then we'll call it a night or a day, depending what part of the world you're in.
Outstanding. Yeah, so a lot of people have been asking about how do you deal with the wealth of resources that you have on the internet and everywhere. So what's the best practice for avoiding rabbit holes while filling all the gaps in your knowledge that you need when you start to work on a project, and if you find a question that leads to more questions, which leads to more questions, how far down that rabbit hole do you go before you get back to your project?
Well, it's like a depth first search algorithm, except with a level cap. you just you got to make sure that you only go 2 levels deep and then you pull back, right? I don't know if the rest of you guys will have an opinion on this, but generally that's why I say stick to a path. If somebody else has created a path for you and that path leads to where you want to go, just trust the path. And if the further away you get from the path, if you can only kind of vaguely see it through the trees, it's time to go back. And there's always going to be this tension and this balance between, you need to be curious as a developer, and you need to be a sponge, and you need to learn lots of stuff. And rarely is 100% of what never is 100% of what you need to learn going to be on that path, right? So it's like, if you're learning how to code, well, sometimes to be a developer in an interview, you're going to get questions about like, how does your operating system work, or like what's going on behind the scenes in the browser, and like absorbing these things just by being curious is part of being a developer. But yes, I would say that you have to have this like spidey sense in your head that like some things are healthy knowledge, but you get into empty calories really quickly, or even just maybe they're not empty calories, like again, like Hacker News and blog posts and things like that, but maybe they are useful, but they're just it's a tangent when you should be going forward. Only some portion of it actually becomes applicable, so you need to pull yourself back. And so that's why I say just trust the path.
Yeah, and I think generally too, you kind of hinted at this, but if I have a question that I'm trying to resolve and there seems to be some potential rabbit holes down there, I'll try to stop once it's useful to me. You know what I mean? So like if the question's been answered, if I kind of understand generally why this function is the one that you're supposed to use, I don't need to know exactly how that function is coded and every little nuance of it. Once I understand how that works, I can implement that and kind of move forward. You don't have to read everything about that.
You can also use one tab, like the Chrome tool, if you're like afraid of closing tabs, like if you open like a million of them when you research it. Just hit one tab. You might never look back at the one tab, but at least it's not gone and you can move on with your life.
And if you have a bunch of tabs open, you can use, it's called the Great Suspender. I don't know if you've seen that Chrome app, but if one of your tabs has been open for more than X amount of minutes and you can set it, it like kills that process, so you're not using all your processing power to have like a billion tabs open.
I'm totally writing that one down. One tab and the Great Suspender.
Yeah, those are my go-tos. Right now I have probably about 30 suspended tabs, and it saves them, so you can just click it and it'll bring it back, kind of like a one-tab thing, but you're not sitting there just using all your processing power.
Actually, another good one is just like the Pocket app, where so if you're reading it, if you find an article that you don't want to lose and you don't want to keep it open in the tab, just use an app like Pocket and just save it for later. And then when you look at it in 6 hours, along with the other 12 articles that you found in your search, you'll quickly, I think, be able to make a more clear-headed decision about, oh, this one seems useful, I'm just not going to worry about the others.
And listen to the Info Magical podcast, because it helps you get over that too. Like, yeah, I don't need to read this. Why did I even open this up? Like, there's no reason I need to learn about Elm. I'm not gonna, like some random article. Like, I know I'm just not gonna do that right now. There's no use in me attempting or pretending like I'm gonna learn this right now.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to go out on. And again, we will send out everything that you need. So thank you all for attending. Thank you everyone who's listening later. Thank you especially Patrick for helping facilitate and putting this together. For Sia and Trevor, both for being awesome students and awesome panelists. So thank everyone. I hope you all have a great night. And just remember, take this stuff to heart, but also be human and build some really, really cool stuff. And I want to see it. And you can always send it over and we'll take a look. So have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.